So DGRW versus SCHD, which one is the better buy and hold? Which one is going to be most profitable from the upcoming surge of AR, VR, metaverses, from pandemics and depression? We're going to take a look at that question along with 5 factors that we usually take a look at in order to determine whether to buy or not. So recently I started reading Robert F. Kennedy's The Real Anthony Fauci, and boy, was it a doozy, because without spoilers being given, that book really highlighted the corruption of big pharma when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic and Anthony Fauci's involvement with that, which leads us to talk about the holdings, especially the holdings for SCHD, because SCHD is a very balanced ETF. The top 15 holdings for SCHD each comprises up to around 3 to 4% of the portfolio. So Amgen, AbbVie, Merck, and Pfizer all make up around 16% of SCHD's portfolio. And we know that Pfizer was one of the companies that were making COVID vaccines. And because they made those COVID vaccines, that pushed their revenue to over $100 billion with a B in 2022. So Robert F. Kennedy's book is a very long book. On Audible, it's like 30 hours, which I am still listening to, but you learn a lot about pandemics and you learn a lot about big pharma. To go back in the timeline, in the early 2000s, we had SARS. The late 2000s, we had swine flu. From 2015 to the present, we had MERS, and from 2019 to the present, we had COVID. So over that 20-year span, big pharma has been consistently making profits through pandemics. And guys, we didn't even talk about HIV and AIDS that Dr. Fauci overlooked. All this is to say that with SCHD's 16% holding in the health technology industry, it is very profitable now and in the future with our corrupted American health system. When it comes to DGRW, they also have stakes in big pharma through Johnson & Johnson and Merck, but they're much bigger in tech because Microsoft and Apple make up about 14% of their entire ETF, which is a big percentage. And Microsoft and Apple are really focused on VR, AR, which, let's face it, we're gonna be using them all over the place when it comes to the metaverse. The thing with the metaverse is it really makes me reflect, because when I was growing up back in the 90s, to have fun after school, what we'd always do is we'd go ride bikes with the neighborhood kids, with your kids from school. But that compared to now, what I often hear from Gen Z is that what they do to waste time, right, is to go on their iPads, go on their iPhones, and they're spending all that time alone or with people online who you're not seeing the faces of. And that's no surprise when the reports come in saying that loneliness, anxiety, depression have all shot up from the 90s to the present day. And when it comes to the metaverse, I can no way see it being a positive for mental health, but I can see it making a very big positive for people's checkbooks in their portfolios. And stick with me here, because I'm going to talk about how DGRW and SCHD actually feed into each other. So before we get there, let's compare some technicals with DGRW and SCHD. First one is PE ratio. DGRW comes in at 19.64 while SCHD at 14.91. The expense ratio for DGRW is 0.28, for SCHD it is 0.06. Dividend for DGRW is 1.91%, while for SCHD it's 3.54%. The 5-year return for DGRW is 11.46%, while for SCHD it's lower at 10.96%. Now, despite having a higher 5-year return for DGRW, I still think that SCHD is 100% the better deal. So earlier in this video, we talked about how DGRW's investment in tech companies like Microsoft and Apple will amplify mental health problems in the future. And what happens when you get prescribed a mental health disorder? They're gonna put you on drugs. And who owns the biggest drug companies in the world? SCHD and DGRW. So they're just a gigantic flywheel of profitability. And guys, this is the current outlook. And personally, I think this is gonna be the future outlook as well. And this is gonna continue, not just in the USA, but for all Western nations as well. So I came across this Twitter post by The Proud Text, which showed a side-by-side photo of people at the beach from the 1970s versus the present day, 2021. Now, I wasn't alive back in the 70s, so people in the 70s will have to comment down below whether it is true that people were skinny AF back in the 70s. Because right now, what it does seem like is that Big Pharma is gonna do as much as they can to keep people sick, depressed, anxious, and dependent on their drugs. Now, if you're also curious about crypto, like Bitcoin specifically, and you want to compare SCHD and Bitcoin and how the woke agenda will keep us all profitable, then you want to check out the video that I made here.